Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all over the world. Dobson 777A here. Well, I stumbled across something today during my research that's really interesting regarding high potential for platinum. But let's get started with the precious metals report. So we had gold was down 0.03 today, silver was up 0.88, platinum 1.11. And we're currently kind of into the after hours a little bit. So gold is down a little bit, silver's down a little bit, and platinum's down a little bit. This is what the chart looked like today for gold and silver. Very similar characteristics here. Very interesting. Another thing that I came across, thought I'd look at our progress on GDX. And here's our 2016 peak, and it looked like we had a significant breakout here from 2016 for the large gold miners, but we're retreating pretty rapidly here. So I'm hoping that we can stay above this so it can be a confirmed breakout instead of a false breakout. Now I want to go through a little bit of history here. Palladium. Let's look at the historical chart on palladium. And you can see that it was at 1400 and it ran to almost 2800, and now it's bouncing around maybe 2000. Now rhodium was maybe like 2500, went all the way up to over 11,000, and now it's sitting at let's say 5500 or something. And that's what this shows right here. Actually, it's curious, we have a bid of 5,500, but they have an ask of 8,500. So there's a pretty big spread on this. And then platinum's sitting around, let's say a little bit above 800. So the curious news, I was reading an article on Kitco talking about Sabine-Stillwater was planning on entering the battery space in due course. And within this interview, and I'll put a link to it so you can watch the interview, it's about 8 minutes, but it talked about a tri-metal catalyst that they were working with. We felt it necessary to get the PGM sector back into balance, so we sponsored research with BASF into what we call tri-metal catalyst. There's potential of potentially a real shortage of palladium. Rhodium is in even worse position. So what they've done is they've come up with a capability of replacing some of the palladium with platinum. And I told you that there's these periodic swaps between platinum and palladium, but this is another strategy that is quite interesting, because what they're doing now is they're going to put all three metals together. And I don't know what the percentage composition is in this. I couldn't find any details. But it looks like this: platinum, palladium, rhodium are, integrated into this honeycomb cross section that is part of your catalytic converter. And I found an article for BASF launching this tri-metal catalyst, but it's very lacking in details, and it's probably because it's a intellectual property. But I would have liked to have known, the percentages they're using each one of these things. But remember, palladium is less rare than platinum, and I'll have to look up what rhodium is. Okay, so when I look at my table that I occasionally reference here, let me zoom in over here so we can look at this. So this is the parts per million in the Earth's crust, and this is an average of, I think it's 5 different methodologies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5 different methodologies. So what I've done is I've taken those 5 and I just averaged them across, and we get silver with 0.075 parts per million. Then palladium is 0.0073, platinum is 0.0039, gold is 0.00273, but look at rhodium. It's a 0.0063, so that's the rarest of each of these, at least in the Earth's crust. That doesn't mean that that's how much they're actually mining, because they actually specifically go trying to find the highest concentration when they mine. But in any event, if they're making these catalytic converters, I can see why they were probably focused on palladium, because it's not quite as rare as platinum or rhodium. So there's probably a if I was to guess, this was probably like a, 85% palladium and then 15% rhodium type thing. But now they're going to add platinum in to try to offset some of those palladium costs. And we'll see how that works. But this is really good news for platinum. So here's what the stock market did today. The stock market was 0.69 positive for S&P, even for NASDAQ, up 1.19 for Dow Jones. Mexico was up 1.73. Eurozone was up a little less than 1%. France was like 1.8, Germany 1%, United Kingdom 1.26. China was down some, Hong Kong was down some, Japan up 0.7, New Zealand 0.66, Singapore down 0.75. So yesterday gold was up 0.18. This is the ETF representations of our tangibles. So up 0.8, platinum was up 0.61, silver up 1.11, and our ETF miners were down just so slightly, basically even. And junior silver miners is what kind of carried the day. Now keep in mind, we have much more detailed information for members. So gold and platinum members get to see the other portfolios, which actually there's some of the newer positions are going through the roof. They're doing fantastic. Now, unintended consequences of the everything shutting down. I saw this article about Georgia is doing some major cuts, and this actually started last year. They started this process. We've got a Republican governor, and he is in there really making some surprisingly strong cuts. And this article is a really good read because there's actually a couple cities that had eliminated all of their they basically outsourced a lot of their jobs, and so now they have no responsibility for any of these pensions. In fact, I think all the pensions were eliminated when it was outsourced, and they've got their costs way under control on some of these cities, so it became a model. And now we're starting to see, them working this at the state level. And it was quite interesting reading about this, because they talked about certain people's jobs going from like $100,000 pay to like 35 or 40,000. Yeah, here we go. Director of Victim Services would see a salary cut from 117,000 to about 45,000. A senior training manager would be offered a lower level paying job paying 35,000, a 56% cut. They're eliminating 26 teachers in the system. And I think a lot of this was part of the prisons area, but cutting about 25,000 a year. Here's $100,000 teachers getting cuts of almost $40,000. So I'm trying to point out that there's unintended consequences that have not hit yet. And when you start seeing this happen, not only at the state level, but the county and city levels of each one of these states, it's going to be a tremendous impact. And then what about the federal government? Are we going to see similar cuts there? I think there isn't a choice. I think it's going to have to happen. So these numbers are actually quite stunning when you look at the size of the cuts. It's quite amazing when you look at it. But I've seen the numbers in California of the number of people out there making hundreds of thousands of dollars in salaries, and it just is very expensive to maintain, especially when you look at the pensions and everything else that are going to be paid out for this. So I'm hoping you understand what's coming. This is the beginning, and it's going to be steamrolling. Now, there was another neat article. This was a couple days ago. I've been holding it in the background. Young people are rushing to leave the big cities in favor of less infected suburbia. You got to think about a lot of these kids went to these big cities because of the nightlife and everything else, and all of that was shut down. And it was so restrictive. You were stuck in your apartment. You couldn't do anything. And they're sitting going, why would I want to be in this place? And especially if they, were seeing significant problems with friends and others getting ill, and they're not seeing it in their home region. So it makes sense when you think about it. Now, unintended consequences. All these kids, we all know how they vote, and they're moving back to areas that probably vote differently, and that's going to kind of corrupt the local scene. Or maybe they won't vote. I don't know. This is a little bit scary when you see this, because we saw what happened to Texas. Texas has, turned from red to almost blue in at least some of the larger cities. So I thought this was another really concerning trend, that they're scattering out like roaches across the country. So I don't know. I hate to see stuff like this, but you think about it. Those guys probably couldn't make pay anymore, and they had to head back to their families. All right, let me know what you think about that, but I hope everybody's treating you well. I hope you're doing well. Do the best you can. God bless.